Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal the situation within the Quartermain family in Port Charles had taken a dark and complicated turn. Drew, Scout's biological father, received a call that his daughter was missing from her foster home. Panic immediately set in as Drew rushed into action, swiftly contacting the authorities and demanding they arrest Danny, accusing him of kidnapping Scout. This claim sent shockwaves through the Quartermain household, stirring emotions and raising questions about the true nature of Drew's relationship with his daughter. Jason and Alexis, who had always been the pillars of stability and protectiveness in the family, were left stunned by Drew's actions. What hurt them the most was that Drew seemed to be completely unaware of the deeper issues at play, especially regarding Scout's emotional well-being. Over the years, Jason and Alexis had come to realize something that Drew had failed to see: Scout wasn't receiving the love and attention she so desperately needed from her biological father. Since Sam's tragic death, Drew had failed to step up as the father Scout needed. Though he was Scout's biological father, he seemed to drift further and further away from her emotional needs. He spent most of his time running after Willow, leaving his daughter to fend for herself. The child, already traumatized by the loss of her mother, was living in a broken home with a father who was emotionally absent, consumed by his own personal relationships. Scout, vulnerable and in need of love and guidance, was left feeling neglected and abandoned by the very person who should have been her strongest support. In contrast, Alexis had been observing this disconnect for a while. She saw how Drew's actions, or lack thereof, were affecting Scout. It was clear to her that Scout was craving more than just physical care. She needed emotional nurturing, a sense of security that Drew was not providing. Alexis, who had her own history of complex family dynamics, understood better than most the deep scars that neglect could leave on a child. It became evident to Alexis that Scout needed a home where she could feel safe and loved, something she wasn't getting under Drew's care. This realization struck a nerve in Alexis, who knew that in order to give Scout the future she deserved, she would have to fight for her. Despite all the obstacles and complications that would come with such a battle, Alexis made up her mind that she would do whatever it took to secure a better future for Scout, even if it meant going up against Drew himself. Meanwhile, Danny, though still a child himself, had always held a deep bond with Scout. He had grown protective of her ever since Sam's death, and the two shared an unbreakable sibling connection. As the days went on and he witnessed the lack of care Scout received from Drew, Danny grew increasingly frustrated and determined to do something about it. He knew his sister needed love, stability, and security, and Drew was failing to provide that. The tension that was growing between Drew and his daughter wasn't just a passing phase. It was deeply rooted in the way Drew prioritized his own needs over Scout's. Danny, however, was not about to sit idly by. Even though he was young, he understood the gravity of the situation, and he made the decision to step up. Danny was not going to allow Scout to continue living in an environment where she wasn't loved or valued. With all of this weighing heavily on his heart, Danny made the bold move to take Scout away from the foster home, feeling the need to protect her from what he saw as a dangerous and unhealthy environment. When Drew found out that Danny had taken Scout without informing anyone, he reacted out of anger, accusing Danny of kidnapping his daughter. This accusation, though harsh and unfounded, only heightened the tension between Drew and the rest of the Quartermain family. But Danny was undeterred by Drew's outbursts and legal threats. His loyalty to his sister was unshakable, and he wasn't going to let Drew's neglectful behavior continue. He had been prepared for a confrontation, especially after the secret that his mother, Sam, had left him. Sam had always been protective of Danny and Scout, and before she died, she made sure to leave him a crucial piece of information. A legal document that would ensure Danny had the rights to take care of Scout if Drew failed to fulfill his role as a father. Sam had known that Drew's emotional distance from his daughter could one day become a problem, and she had made sure that Danny would be able to step in and be the father Scout needed. Armed with this secret and unwavering in his resolve, Danny made it clear to Drew that he would not back down. He demanded that Drew relinquish control and allow him to take care of Scout. Danny knew that with the legal documents Sam had left him, he had the upper hand. It wasn't just about what was legally right, it was about what was morally right. Scout deserved to grow up in a home filled with love and care, and Danny was willing to fight for that. Jason, ever the protector, supported Danny's decision. Knowing that this was the right path for both Danny and Scout. He understood the importance of family and the responsibility that came with it. Jason's support only strengthened Danny's resolve to fight for his sister's future, and together, they stood their ground against Drew's accusations. Alexis, too, was fiercely protective of Scout. She couldn't allow Drew's emotional neglect to continue, and she made it known that she would back Danny in his efforts to provide a better life for Scout. Ultimately, Drew was forced to face the uncomfortable truth: he had failed his daughter. Despite his love for her, his emotional absence had left deep scars. And it had become clear that he was no longer the person best suited to care for Scout. With Jason, Alexis, and Danny standing firm, Drew reluctantly agreed to let go of his legal control and allow Danny to take over the responsibility of raising Scout. It was a painful decision for him, but it was the right one. This moment marked a pivotal turning point in the lives of the Quartermain family. Danny, still a young boy, had proven himself capable of making the tough decisions and stepping up as the man of the house. In doing so, he not only secured a better future for Scout but also found his own strength and sense of purpose. As for Drew, while his love for Scout was undeniable, he had finally come to terms with the reality that sometimes, love isn't enough. It takes more than feelings, it takes action, sacrifice, and consistency to truly provide the nurturing environment a child deserves. In the end, it was Danny's courage, Alexis's determination, and Jason's unwavering support that won the battle for Scout's future. The Quartermain family, though fractured and complicated, came together for the sake of Scout, ensuring that she would finally have the love and care she needed to heal and thrive. Danny, though still a young boy, had always been a fiercely protective and loving older brother to Scout. After the tragic death of their mother, Sam, Danny had stepped up as Scout's emotional anchor, becoming her constant support in a world that had suddenly lost its stability. Despite being Jason's son, Danny's connection to Scout went far beyond mere blood relations. Their bond was forged through shared grief, deep understanding, and an unspoken promise to always look out for each other. In the wake of Sam's death, Danny quickly realized that he had to take on a larger role in Scout's life, not just as a sibling, but as someone who could offer her the emotional security that had been ripped away from both of them. Scout, already scarred by the loss of her mother, needed a figure of protection and stability. And Danny, who had watched Drew's inability to provide that same kind of protection, knew he had to act. Drew, despite being Scout's biological father, had failed to truly be present for his daughter. His emotional detachment, coupled with his preoccupation with his own life and romantic entanglements, had left Scout to struggle through her grief largely on her own. It was clear to Danny that Drew was not equipped to nurture Scout the way she deserved, and Danny couldn't stand by and watch his sister suffer any longer. What gave Danny the strength and courage to take such drastic action was a secret that Sam, his mother, had left for him. Before Sam passed away, she had a deep understanding that Drew might not be the father Scout needed. Recognizing that the emotional gap between Drew and Scout could lead to serious consequences for her well-being, Sam took steps to ensure that Danny could step in if the need ever arose. In her final moments, Sam made provisions that would give Danny the legal right to care for Scout if Drew's shortcomings as a father ever became too much for Scout to bear. Sam had left Danny a will containing crucial information that would allow him to take custody of Scout, ensuring that the girl wouldn't be left in the hands of someone who couldn't fully love and care for her. Armed with this secret, Danny knew what he had to do. He wasn't afraid to face Drew or to stand up to him, even though Drew had a far greater legal claim to Scout as her biological father. Danny understood the risks, but his love for Scout and his commitment to her happiness outweighed any fear or hesitation. To him, it was simple: Scout needed him. And he was ready to step into the role that Drew had failed to fill. Despite his youth, Danny was incredibly mature for his age. Especially when it came to matters of family and protecting those he loved. He didn't need anyone to tell him what was right or wrong. His heart knew exactly what he had to do. And so, without a moment's doubt, Danny began putting his plan into motion. He would not allow Drew to continue neglecting his daughter. Not when Scout needed a real father figure to guide her through the pain and confusion of her young life. Jason, Danny's father, supported his son's decision without question. Jason, who had always been a protector of his family, knew exactly what Danny was going through. He recognized the weight of the responsibility Danny had taken on and trusted his son's instincts completely. Jason had seen firsthand how much Danny loved Scout and how dedicated he was to her well-being. As a father, Jason could see that Danny was making the right choice. Jason's support was a comforting and powerful thing for Danny. He knew that with his father behind him, he could stand strong in the face of any opposition, especially from Drew. Danny's confrontation with Drew was inevitable. The tension between them had been simmering for some time, and now it was all coming to a head. Drew, having heard about Danny's actions, was enraged. He couldn't fathom that his own son would go behind his back and take Scout without his permission. Drew was deeply offended, and he lashed out, accusing Danny of kidnapping Scout. He demanded that she be returned to him immediately, and he threatened legal action. However, Danny was not intimidated. He stood his ground, refusing to back down. He knew that Drew's threats were empty. He had the legal right to care for Scout, and he wasn't going to let Drew use his authority as a father to bully him into giving up. With his mother's will in hand, Danny was determined to fight for his sister's future. He wasn't just fighting for custody, he was fighting for Scout's emotional well-being. He couldn't, in good conscience, let her remain in a home where she wasn't truly loved or cared for. His resolve only grew stronger when he realized that, as a family, they were all on the same side. Jason, Alexis, and even other members of the Quartermain family had begun to rally around Danny and Scout, recognizing that the child deserved so much more than Drew could offer. Danny's confrontation with Drew wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for what was best for Scout. Danny wasn't asking for permission from Drew. He was demanding that Drew put aside his own selfishness and do what was right for his daughter. In that moment, Danny made it clear that no one, not even Drew, was going to stand in the way of his commitment to protecting Scout. It was as if Danny had transformed from a boy into a man overnight, stepping into a role that no child should have to bear. But one that he embraced with the strength of someone who knew the stakes. Drew, confronted with the truth about his own failings as a father, had no choice but to back down. Though his heart ached for the daughter he loved, Drew could no longer deny that Danny, with his unwavering determination and deep love for Scout, was the one who could truly offer her the stability and affection she needed. In the end, Drew had to accept that sometimes, love alone isn't enough. It takes action, it takes sacrifice. And it takes consistency to be the kind of parent a child truly needs. Danny's victory, though hard-won, was bittersweet. He had gained the right to care for Scout. But the emotional toll it had taken on both him and Drew was significant. However, Danny knew that he had done the right thing. With Jason's support and Alexis's unwavering belief in him, Danny now had the chance to give Scout the life she deserved. And though the road ahead would be difficult, Danny was more than ready to face whatever challenges came his way, knowing that his love for his sister would always guide him. When Drew received the shocking news that Danny had taken Scout from the foster home without informing anyone, his reaction was swift, impulsive, and filled with intense fury. Drew's emotions ran wild, the heat of his anger clouding his judgment as he immediately called the police, demanding they arrest Danny on charges of kidnapping. To Drew, this was a betrayal of the worst kind, a defiant act that threatened his authority as Scout's father. His mind was set on the notion that Danny had done something wrong, something unforgivable, and he would stop at nothing to make Danny pay for what he believed to be a reckless act. However, Drew's immediate response only seemed to deepen the chasm between him and the Quartermain family. Jason and Alexis, the pillars of strength and support for their family, found themselves shocked and appalled by Drew's actions. The very idea that Drew could accuse Danny of kidnapping his sister, a child who had always been emotionally supportive of Scout, was more than they could stomach. Jason, who had long been a protector of his loved ones, was livid. He had seen Drew's failures as a father for years, and now, to see him turn on Danny, his own son, was something Jason couldn't reconcile. How could Drew be so blind to his own shortcomings? How could he be so quick to accuse Danny, who had only acted out of love for Scout, of something so grave? For Jason, the reality of Drew's anger was not just a personal betrayal, it was a tragic reflection of the emotional neglect Scout had endured under Drew's care. Jason had seen how much Scout longed for her father's love, how much she had suffered since Sam's death, yet Drew had been too caught up in his own life to notice. Scout's emotional needs had always been secondary to Drew's desires, and now, with this accusation, it seemed Drew had once again chosen himself over his daughter. Alexis, too, was infuriated by Drew's actions. She had long suspected that Drew wasn't providing the emotional support Scout needed, but now, seeing him accuse Danny of kidnapping, Alexis couldn't hold back her disgust. She had been a mother herself, and she knew what it meant to protect a child at all costs. To her, Drew was in the wrong. And she wasn't going to let him get away with it. Alexis stood up to Drew with a fiery intensity, calling him out for his neglect and blind anger. "You have no idea what you're doing, Drew." Alexis's voice trembled with frustration and disbelief. "You're pushing Scout away. She begged Danny to take her because she can't rely on you anymore. She needs love, stability, and protection. And you're too busy chasing after your own life to see that. You're hurting her more by accusing Danny of something he didn't do. This is your fault, Drew. You're the one who's failed her." Drew, in his fury, could hardly process Alexis's words. His anger was too great, his frustration too overwhelming. But Alexis wasn't done, she wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. With every word, Alexis cut deeper into the walls Drew had built around himself, exposing the harsh truth he had been avoiding for so long. She continued, her voice filled with a fierce protectiveness for Scout. "If you keep doing this, Drew, if you keep putting yourself first, you'll lose her. Scout will blame herself for wanting to be with Danny, for asking him to take her away. Is that really what you want? For her to think she's the problem? She needs her father, not a man who abandons her when things get hard." Alexis's words rang with the conviction of a mother who had seen the consequences of neglect and emotional distance. Drew's face softened for a moment, the raw truth of Alexis's words sinking in. But his pride and stubbornness quickly took over. He couldn't admit to his own failings, he had always believed that love alone was enough. Now, it seemed like his world was falling apart. And his instinct was to fight back, to retain control, to keep things the way they were. But Alexis wasn't backing down. She knew the stakes were too high. And she couldn't let Drew destroy what little was left of their family's fragile bond. "Enough, Drew," Alexis said firmly, standing her ground. "I'm not going to let you do this anymore. If you truly care about Scout, you'll step aside. Danny is the one who's been there for her. He's the one who's shown her love and care, not you. He's the one who has earned the right to protect her." Meanwhile, Danny was standing his ground, unwavering in his decision. Despite his young age, Danny was no stranger to the weight of responsibility. He had always felt a sense of duty toward Scout. And after Sam's passing, he had naturally stepped into the role of her protector. He had witnessed firsthand the emotional toll that Drew's neglect had taken on Scout. And he couldn't sit idly by any longer. He knew what he had to do, he had to protect his sister, and not even Drew's anger or the threat of legal consequences, would stop him. Danny didn't feel guilty for taking Scout away from the foster home. To him, it wasn't about breaking the rules, it was about doing what was right. Scout was his sister, and she needed him. He couldn't let her stay in a place where she was being neglected, where her emotional well-being was being ignored. For Danny, it was simple: family came first. And he would do whatever it took to ensure Scout felt loved, safe, and valued. With Jason's support, Danny stood up to Drew with unwavering confidence. Jason had always been a role model for Danny, teaching him the value of standing up for what's right, even in the face of adversity. Jason's presence by Danny's side gave him the strength he needed to confront Drew head-on, to fight for Scout's future. Jason, too, could see the injustice in Drew's actions, and he was ready to take a stand alongside his son. "I'm not backing down," Danny said firmly, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I'm not going to let you hurt her anymore. She deserves better than this, Drew. She deserves to be loved, to be cared for. And if you can't give that to her, then I will." Drew was silent for a moment, the weight of Danny's words hitting him hard. But his pride still burned, and he wasn't ready to admit his own failings. Instead, he tried to justify his actions, continuing to accuse Danny of wrongdoing. But the more he spoke, the more he realized that Danny's resolve was unshakable. Drew was starting to see the reality of the situation, that no matter how much he tried to hold on to control, Danny was the one who had proven time and again that he could be the father figure Scout needed. The truth was undeniable: Danny, despite his youth, had the heart of a protector. He had the courage to face Drew and fight for Scout's future, knowing that his sister's happiness and emotional well-being were more important than anything else. Drew, in the end, was forced to face the harsh reality of his own neglect and emotional distance. It wasn't easy for him to accept, but he knew that Danny, not him, was the one who had the strength and love to truly care for Scout. With Jason's guidance and Alexis's unwavering support, Danny emerged victorious in his fight to protect his sister. Drew, though hurt and resistant, finally relented. He realized that his love for Scout, though genuine, was not enough to heal the wounds he had caused. In that moment, he understood that true love meant more than just saying the words; it meant being there, consistently, and putting someone else's needs above your own. Drew stepped aside, allowing Danny to step into the role that he had failed to fulfill. Danny's courage had paid off. Scout would no longer have to endure emotional neglect or the pain of feeling unloved. She would grow up in a home where she was truly cared for, surrounded by people who would protect her at all costs. The road ahead would still be difficult, but Danny had proven that. Even at his young age, he was more than capable of taking on the responsibility of raising Scout and giving her the love and care she deserved. With his determination, Danny was able to force Drew to concede. Drew realized that, whether he wanted to or not, his actions were only making everything worse. He finally understood that he could no longer neglect Scout. And he agreed to allow Danny and Scout to live together. However, in Drew's heart, there were still many unspoken truths. Although he loved Scout, he also recognized that his love for his daughter was not enough to nurture and care for her properly. Drew knew he couldn't continue making the same mistakes, and therefore, he decided to step back, allowing Danny and Scout to live happily together. This decision not only brought joy to Danny and Scout but also marked a significant turning point in the Quartermain family's life. Jason and Alexis, who had protected their family for so many years, finally saw that they could create a loving and warm environment for their children. Despite the lingering unresolved issues, Drew was forced to confront the truth, that love is the most important thing, and without genuine love, it is impossible to raise a child properly.